Alright guys, Ridge Racer again. Just to pick up where we left off. Right now, as you can see, I don't know if you guys can see this on the video, but for this Hobby King 450 GT, it's essentially a V2. Just the way the servos are mounted on this particular heli, I have channel 1 set to reverse, channel 2 is set to normal, and channel 3 is set to normal as well. Excuse me. Alright, you know, depending on how your servos are set up, you might have to reverse 1 or 2 channels, you know. Alright, so I'll go through the next tab, just servo trim. Alright, now servo trim, that should be set with a flat pitch curve, collective pitch stick, your left stick for us guys with mode 2 radios, that should be set to mid stick. That way your servos are of course at a mid stick point. Alright, so with that said, you want to make sure you use the trim, of course, just like when you're setting up a flybar heli. You know, use the trim to adjust your servos to as close as possible to be as close as possible to parallel to the ground. Alright, so that just explains the function of servo trim. Swash travel, this is basically, it's going to, you know, affect how much aileron travel and elevator travel that you have on the swash plate. You know, to determine, I started with 60, which is the stock setting. And of course, the way you're going to determine what's appropriate for you or not, you're going to have to use, you know, maybe a digital pitch indicator, or, you know, if you have one of these new flybarred heads, you know, most of the times they come with that little piece that you screw into the top of the head and insert a flybar rod in, and you can still use your old pitch gauge. But nevertheless, you know, that's how you adjust the total amount of elevator and aileron cyclic pitch. All right. With the way my heli is set up right now, it's going to be probably different for yours. I have plus minus 12 degrees of collective pitch and about 8 degrees of aileron and elevator cyclic pitch. All right. The next menu is collective pitch. All right. Now this value determines the total amount of collective pitch that you have at both top and bottom stick. Now, depending on how your heli is set up, you might actually have to use a negative value here. You know, for this HK450GT, I have a negative 70 value in there so that the swash actually moves in the correct direction. If it's a positive number, the swash would actually move down when I pushed positive collective pitch up, just because of the way the heli is configured and the way the servos are mounted. All right, so just be aware of that, guys. All right. Tail setup. This menu controls the total amount of tail limit A and tail limit B. That's the amount of deflection that you have going either positive pitch on the tail or a negative pitch. All right. Your servo trim, of course, is here as well, and you also have the servo reverse for your tail servo here on this menu. If you just hit that little gray box on the lower left hand corner. All right. Next menu is gyro direction. Now with the gyro direction for this particular heli, I have the pitch gyro direction. This is all dependent on how you mount the gyro, of course, on your heli in that previous menu where we showed the installation direction. Now you're going to have to confirm, this is all once you have the servos hooked up and everything like that, of course, right? You have to confirm that the heli compensates in the correct directions for both pitch, roll, and yaw. All right. Now with this particular heli, I have the pitch set for normal, roll is set for reverse, and where I have my servo boom mounted, I have yaw set for normal. All right. This is going to be different for some people, of course, depending on if you have a Pro or a V2 or whatever the case is. All right. But the trick is, if you follow the directions on this guide right here, on in the pictures on this particular tab, you want to make sure for forward pitch, the swash plate, if you pitch the heli forward, the front of the swash plate actually goes up to compensate. The swash plate is always going to try to stay level, parallel to the ground. That's the trick to making sure that your swash is moving in the correct direction. All right. And the same for the roll. All right. If you roll the heli to the left, all right, the swash should actually, if you're looking at the heli from the back, the right side of the swash should go up, left side should go down. All right. Pictures are pretty self-explanatory there. And of course the yaw is pretty straightforward. That's what you'd experience with a regular single axis gyro. Just make sure that the gyro is operating in the correct direction for yaw. And also, from that tail setup menu, make sure the tail servo is moving in the correct direction. Now finally we come to Pyro optimization. All right. Now with the Pyro optimization, you want to select check optimization direction. That's the first one to the left, the first gray box to the left, and that's going to cause your swash plate to tilt in a given direction, right? Now the thing to be mindful with this, it's a little tricky because if you have it hooked up to a PC or something like that and the short cable, might be a little difficult, but all that's really required, you only want to rotate it maybe about 90 degrees, so try to plan for that. What you're going to do is the swash is going to tilt in a given direction. You want to rotate the heli's tail 90 degrees, doesn't matter either direction you want, and just make sure the swash plate, whichever the lowest point of the swash plate that it's tilted, stays relatively in the same direction. It points in the same direction. You'll see the swash plate actually kind of spin. If you want to pick a reference point where that lowest point is, and make sure the swash plate actually follows that reference point that you picked, where it actually stays almost like a compass. It stays in that same direction. You rotate a compass body and the arrow always points in the same direction, providing you're walking in that same direction, right? So it's a little tricky at first. It's one of those things that you also want to confirm in flight that it is working correctly. You will notice a difference, providing it is set up right, where you'll do a pyro and the heli will stay pretty much planted in that same spot. You do a fast pyro, it won't be all over the place. It'll just do a real nice tight pyro, providing it's set up right. And that brings you to the last menu. All right, and that's your basic setup. One thing of note, when you're plugging the servos into the CopterX gyro, please make sure the polarity is correct on the servo leads into the gyro. The signal leads should be facing up towards the top of the gyro, and ground lead should be facing down to the bottom. All right, that's for all the servos that are plugged into the gyro itself. Also, if you're using analog servos for your main rotor gain settings, you want to start off with about 20, stock default settings are 40. Start off with 20. Using digital servos, then you can get away with a higher gain settings. You know, but I would say for any servo, probably start off with about 20, 25. All right. Analog, definitely a highest I've achieved with an analog servo is 20, 25 on that setting. All right. And for your tail rotor gain, you know, probably want to start off with a true gain of setting of about 30, 35%, and then work your way up or down depending on how fast your tail rotor servo is and how much slop you have in your tail setup. All right. Other final notes: make sure your heli's mechanically sound. These gyros do not like to fly with any bent or seized bearings or any parts like that. I know a lot of people had issues, including myself, getting the tails to hold. You know, I had some slow wag issues. I think I traced it down to an issue with bad bearings in the blade grips themselves. I ended up replacing the entire blade grip assemblies, and because the HK450GT comes with unweighted blade grips, I wanted to get weighted blade grips like the Pro. And of course, when I bought that, it came with new bearings. So now the tail holds rock solid with a pretty decent gain setting. I'm about 30% on the gain settings, true gain settings. All right, guys. Any other comments or tips? You know, feel free to post in the CopterX web forum on rcgroups.com. Just wanted to throw together a quick video for anybody that needed a little help. All right, that's just the basic setup. Once you get past that, you want to enter in your preset parameters. That's the top 5 up at the top. I started off with 3D soft, and I think that's about it. Anything I missed, you know, I think a lot of other stuff, most of everything was covered in the video, in the web post. All right, thanks again, everybody.